Leading intelligence officials in the US and UK now believe, as you would know, a bomb planted by Islamic State was the most likely cause of the Russian jet crash that killed 224 people when it broke up over Egypt. So, what does this mean? What could it signal? Otago University international relations expert Robert Patman joins me now. Robert, great to have you on again. The last time, good morning. The last time we talked, you actually said that Putin's recent escalation in his attack on ISIS could make Russia more of a target. Is that what we've seen?
Possibly. In the last few days, Paul, a number of factors have changed, I think, the international interpretation of what's going on. The US and British intelligence have been shaped by several factors. One is satellite information. Military satellite ingress was a big heat flash just before the plane broke up. Secondly, it seems that the British and the Americans are intercepting internal communications of ISIS. Thirdly, ISIS is very strong in the Sinai Peninsula, very active, and have been fighting running battles with the Egyptian government, so they're well placed. And the other factor is that the Russian company, the airline and company, Metrojet, they said they've got quite clear evidence themselves that the plane did not go down due to pilot error or because of any technical problems.
It's a little hard to necessarily believe everything you might hear from Metrojet, but you put all of those things together, and it's certainly pointing in one particular direction. And just to put the final tick on what that direction is, the thought is that a bomb was taken on board or placed on board at the airport in Egypt.
Yes, and this is why the British and a number of other countries, well, first of all, Britain as a country has suspended all flights in and out of Sharm El-Sheikh, the resort airport where the Russian plane took off from. But a number of countries, a number of airlines like Lufthansa and in fact the Dubai-based Emirates are rescheduling their flights to avoid the Sinai Peninsula altogether.
All right. One of the interesting things here is the way ISIS claimed responsibility earlier on, but in a very tentative way, which would potentially indicate they are trying to protect their people on the ground, presumably so they can continue this kind of terrorism.
Yeah, that's right, Paul. I think that's one of the things that reinforced the initial view that this was down to technical failure, because they immediately made the claim. ISIS immediately claimed responsibility for bringing the plane down after it happened, but there was no revealing of details, which made people think this was a very vague claim. However, as your comments and questions suggested, it may be that if this was an inside job, and this is what the British and the Americans seem to be leaning towards, their intelligence services, that it was an inside job, that someone, a mole if you like, was working for ISIS in the Sharm El-Sheikh airport. And therefore they're probably trying to protect one of their people who may be involved in this incident, if indeed it was a terrorist incident. Which again would tend to suggest more than a bomb being taken on the plane. This was a bomb planted on the plane. If indeed this all turns out to be the case, what does this say about an escalation in terms of tactics by ISIS? Well, I think ISIS, they've been on the receiving end of Russian airstrikes since the end of September. About 10% of Russian airstrikes have been hitting them. And they've always made it clear since that began that they would go after Russia. And I think they're sending a message to Russia and I think the Russians will retaliate quite heavily if these findings are confirmed. Not findings, but this analysis is confirmed. Yes. I think the Russians will go after ISIS, but that's part of the strategy. Bring the Russians in, make them overextend themselves, and weaken them, and probably undermine, if they can, Mr. Putin generally, but any other external power getting involved. Well, we know the Russians, Putin in particular, are very bullish. If this is proved, as you say, they will go in boots and all, but they're basically boots and all now because, they are very cash-strapped. They must be extended about as far as they can be now, wouldn't they be? Yeah, and the other thing is we can't rule out domestic problems for Mr. Putin. Everybody sort of depicted him as a sort of strategic genius when he first intervened with airstrikes. That's true. But a few of us were sceptical about this, and I think the costs now of involvement are beginning to come through. And this is ISIS are a formidable organisation. They've got 50,000 fighters,
and they're very
determined.
Yep, and plenty of money. Robert, thank you so much for your analysis. Robert Patman, University of Otago international relations expert.